When it comes to learning difficulties like dyslexia, lasting change starts with the right approach. At the Morris Center, we go beyond traditional tutoring, offering comprehensive, evidence-based programs that retrain the brain for lifelong success. With over 35 years of experience, we've helped thousands of clients overcome learning challenges in just months, not years. Find out how we can help your child succeed at themorriscenter.com.
This is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network. Welcome to the Vintage Homeschool Mom Show. Your host, Felice Gerwitz, is an author, a publisher, and your radio show host. She will encourage, educate, and inspire you with answers to your most pressing questions from homeschool, marriage, parenting, and much more. Felice loves to equip moms to live a Christian life because every moment counts. Be sure to visit her website at mediaangels.com. And here's your host, Felice Gerwitz.
There are many different parenting philosophies, but what about parenting that works? One of the biggest categories that I've ever seen in a bookstore is the shelves on how to parent. In this podcast, we're going to discuss parenting that really works. Hey friends and welcome. My name is Felice Gerwitz and today I'm going to share an episode with you that is very important to me because I was one of those people that was always looking for the next best book on parenting, and I found that many of them just didn't work for me and my needs. So today I am going to attempt to do a podcast on parenting that works, and hopefully you'll find something in here that's beneficial for you and your family. This is episode 550, and you can find today's show notes at vintagehomeschoolmoms.com, along with some links to our sponsors as well as other podcasts on this network. If you enjoy this podcast, check out the Ultimate Homeschool Podcast Network for other podcasts that you may enjoy. Well, if you can parent well, your family is going to enjoy peace and a wonderful life. Do you hear those violins? I wish, right? Well, we can parent in a way that works. And if you have something that works really well for you, please head over to the website and leave your comment under the post, because I would love to hear what you have to say. Because my parenting has been up and down over the years. Sometimes I would say, oh my gosh, that worked really well. And then others didn't work nearly as well. Good parenting requires stability in your marriage, and if you're upset with your spouse or things aren't working out, that would be a good place to start. And also make sure you and your spouse are on the same page. Sadly, my husband and I were not on the same page, and I think at some points that's why parenting didn't work well for us. When we finally realized we needed, to back each other up in our discipline, we found that it was so much better. Years ago, I read a short book on parenting, and it really focused on the child in a way that resonated with me. I'll share the simple technique with you later, but first, before I do, it needs a really strong foundation for this to work. Parenting requires a balanced approach, but one of the most important things is letting your kids know you love them. Why do I say this? Well, after disciplining my child, I would say, "Do you think I love you?" And I was so shocked when my son would say, "No, you don't." And then he began to cry. Of course, that's a killer for any parent. And I think that's why it's so difficult to parent our children, is because we want the best for them. And it hurts us when we parent them. A lot of times it hurts us more than it hurts them. Many children think discipline equals being mean. It's not if it's done with love. If you parent out of anger or lose control, that's a separate thing altogether. But parenting can keep peace in the home. Think about how you currently parent. How do you discipline? Do you do time out, or do you use corporal punishment? Do you parent in anger? Do you model good behavior or one that you expect from your children? And do you encourage communication? Think about that, because that's important, the way you currently parent. And if it works for you, great. But if you'd like some other ways, I'm going to share with you my list of do's and don'ts. So the first would be never parent in anger. If you need to take a time out, do it for yourself. I've had to do this more times than most, and I always would say, oh, it's because I'm Italian and we lose our temper. But truly, I realized it was not an excuse. Sometimes I was so upset I would have to say to the kids, I'm really upset right now, and I need to get under control before we talk about it. Things obviously changed as the children got older. In fact, at times I was so at loss for what the discipline was going to be. I was so upset. So I would just say, I'm going to take a moment and pray, and then I'll get back with you on what your discipline is going to be, and then we'll discuss it. And the first time I remembered, my oldest son just kind of scoffed at that. After the Lord, which I feel was inspired by the Holy Spirit, gave me the perfect idea for discipline for him, and it worked, he never scoffed again. And I really feel like sometimes we just need to pray alone or pray with our kids to get some insight about what we need to do, because we don't ever want to discipline in anger. Another good point is to model the behavior you expect. Have you ever said, oh my gosh, my kids just pick up all my bad habits and they don't do the good things that I do? Well, I used to say that until I realized I was modeling my bad behavior more than I was modeling the good. And so that's another important aspect. Listening, encouraging good communication is important. My daughter, God bless her, listens to every little complaint from her kids, and she's a saint. I was not that type of parent, and I commend you if you are, and blessings to you as well. I just didn't have a lot of patience for what I considered pettiness. And yet, I think it is important that you're there for your kids and you listen. But sometimes I feel like their complaints are just that, complaining. But if you can do that and listen and just say you understand and then go on, that's wonderful. The last is a pet peeve, no character assassination. So what do I mean by that? No saying, you're stupid, you're an idiot, I can't believe you're so dumb, or worse. It's not allowed at any time in our family. And when I was growing up, stupid was a bad word. So I continued that in our home. I just felt like it was easier to deal with children who were precise about what the issue was instead of calling them names or having them call each other names. Think about why you discipline your child. Is it to encourage good behavior, correct misbehavior? Maybe keep your child from harming others? I think the worst thing with little ones is when kids bite. It's very difficult to break them of that habit if you don't do it immediately. And that goes to teaching self-control, and open communication is important. But again, I'm not one that can sit and listen to a lot of complaining. If it's constructive, then I'm all for it. But if it's just whining and complaining, I have a hard time with that. Contrary to what your child might believe, good discipline makes children happier. Your entire family will greatly benefit if your kids understand what is required. And I've shared this story before, especially if you're a longtime podcast listener. But I think it bears sharing again. When my kids were little, we were on a really short little weekend vacation with my sister-in-law and brother-in-law and their two kids. And our children were the same ages. And my sister-in-law said, do you want to go into the store? And it was one of those glass blower stores. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I said, I will join you in a minute, but just give me a minute. So I took my two kids and I said to them, you have a choice. We're going to go into the store and it has lots of things that can break. So you can either stay out here and we won't go in the store, or you can put your hands in your pockets or just clasp them in front of yourself. And I just showed them, how they could hold their hands. And I said, which do you want to do? Because you're not allowed to touch anything in the store. And if you really want to touch something, you need to ask me first. But I'm probably going to say no because it's all glass. And what happens when you drop glass? And they said, it will break. So I explained that if they touched anything or they didn't have their hands in their pockets or clasped in front of them, then we would go out of the store. And so I went in and we looked through all these different things, and the kids, asked if they could, look at something. And I said, well, thankfully, most of it was behind glass, but like a glass cabinet. But I said to the kids, this probably isn't a good store for us to go into, but we wanted to watch the glass blower. So we did that. And the lady complimented me when we left on how good they were. And my sister-in-law said, how did you do that? And I said, well, that's why it took me a while to get in here, because I explained the situation. I gave them an option of where to put their hands. I permitted them to touch items if they asked first. And this store was pretty much a no to everything. And I explained the consequences, that if they didn't listen, we were going to leave. And then I asked them to tell me what was expected. Did I have to do this every single time that a store, was someplace that was off limits to the kids? Pretty much, except when they got a little bit older, I would just say, what do I expect? And they would tell me not to touch anything unless we ask. And I would say, right. If a child's too little, I would hold them or put them in a stroller. And I would say to them, if you can't sit in your stroller or listen, I'm not putting you down, then we'll go out. So the kids knew what was expected, and they were pretty good. The primary reason that kids don't listen to one parent or the other is because they're not on the same page or they contradict each other. My husband used to say, I would tell the kids to do something, and all he would say is, well, and the way he said it was a contradiction, and he didn't even realize it. And finally, I just said to him when we were alone, you undermine my discipline each and every time. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I said, I'll say, go pick up your toys, for example. And you'll say, well, you can do it after whatever. And I said, we can't do that. If you want them to wait, you can say to me, kind of quietly, is it okay if I say this, or, what do you think about this? But if one or the other of us gives an item for the children to do or instructions, and the other one's saying, well, no, you don't have to do that, and you can do this other thing first, it doesn't show the children that you're a united front. And as my husband says, I agree. I have many words, and those words often are to make my children understand the why of what is expected. And maybe I over-explain, but my husband would use fewer words, and he'd make a bigger impact on our kids. In fact, I used my husband's ability to just get to the point with the boys when they were older and teenagers. They didn't want to hear my entire long dissertation on why something was or wasn't allowed. So many times I'd say to my husband, this is an issue coming up, and could you talk to the kids? And that really saved us more times than not. Especially when the boys were traveling with sports. And I remember the kids all getting in trouble except for my son and two other people. And they were caught out, vaping. And not that my son had any interest in that, but he was in his room, hotel room, watching a movie with another boy. And I said to him later, I said, why didn't you go out with the other kids, even if you weren't going to vape? I just, and he goes, why are you asking me? I go, I just want to know what your train of thinking was. And he said, Mom, nothing good can come out of vaping. They were going to get caught, and I just didn't want any part in it. And that's what you want at some point. You want kids who can reason on their own, who can figure things out. And that's our goal with successful parenting, is that children will be able to figure out what the best option is without you having to be there and tell them. My husband was way more permissive than I was. And one of the reasons is that as a homeschool mom, if you're there with me, or homeschool dad, we're with our kids 24/7. And he just saw them after work. He left really early in the morning, so he'd see them after work and on weekends, and he missed the kids, and therefore was a little bit more lenient. So we would have a date night often to get back on the same page with our discipline requirements so that we were not contradicting each other. Parenting works if you tell your children you love them and you're consistent. If I had to pick one thing, it would be consistency. As my husband would also say, I'm quoting him a lot in this podcast, kids are gamblers, and they're going to take that chance that you won't follow through that one time. When your kids are older, pick your battles. Is blue hair okay? Well, some parents think it is. Or is it okay to dress homeless? Whatever that is. I was blessed because my kids were all athletes, and they pretty much, dressed like they were practicing baseball or softball. But every infraction cannot be a hill to die on, because that isn't going to work. When they're little, we discipline a lot more, and we're correcting a lot more. But as they get older, that disciplining needs to become less and less. As parents, we need to praise our kids. We need to tell them when we expect self-control. We need to not allow our kids to bite or hit, especially each other, because that's only going to translate into other kids when they're around other kids. Play acting is a great way to teach good behavior before the events happen. I have a series of character planners that are excellent, and they have a whole section on acting out, or if the kids are older, writing out their answers to scenarios that I present. For example, if your child's at a friend's house watching and they turn on an inappropriate movie, what does the child do? And those kinds of scenarios are in the character planners, and I put links in the show notes. As promised, I'm going to share with you 3 stages of parenting that works, and it is pretty much a simplified version of it. And I'm going to explain it in detail online. But the first is to maintain eye contact, to explain things in the I. I'm disappointed. I witnessed. I'm upset. But not you, just an I. And the last one is to give the child a hug and tell them you love them. I'm going to break it down further in this podcast, and I'm probably going to do a follow-up on this coming up. But in detail, it's take your child somewhere private, and you start with a big sigh that signifies you're about to begin, and always having eye contact. And you start, after you take that sigh, saying, I love you and I want what's best for you, but I am very disappointed in what I just witnessed. I saw that you punched your brother and then you tripped him, and I'm upset that your brother is hurt. And I'm also disappointed that I watched you lose control. There's a little bit of you there, but... And then I would go on and discuss the infraction, maintaining eye contact. If my child started to look like he was getting the message and upset that I was upset, then I would pretty much stop there. But if my child looked really stoic and self-righteous and they knew that they couldn't discuss, this was my time to talk, and then I was going to give them a little bit of time. But I would continue with the I feel instead of the you did. And I would say, I love you, and I know you can do better, and this is the affirming part. And I know that you can use your self-control, and I know that you can hold back from hitting or punching or tripping. And I know that getting upset is normal, but hurting other people is not allowed. And I love you, and I know that you're better than that. Are you ready to ask forgiveness from your brother, and then from the family? And then I would wait for the child to respond, and then we would go on. The whole point was that it didn't matter that there was a why to this. There really was no reason to hurt another member of the family. Yes, I understand, especially families with lots of boys, that this is pretty much how they solve their problems. And there were times when we just let our kids deal with it on their own. But when it escalated, we realized that we needed to step in. I hope this makes sense. You can use parts of this method or make it your own. And like I said, I'm probably going to do a follow-up podcast on this because it takes a lot more explaining. But in the end, we want happy and healthy children who will grow up to love and serve the Lord, and in many cases grow up to be wonderful adults. Our involvement is time well spent with our kids, and that can never be taken away from us. I don't regret any of the time that I didn't grow a career and I spent it with my kids and homeschooling. Do you have a discipline technique that works? Well, I hope you share it with us on the show notes at Vintage Homeschool Moms. You can look for episode 550, and on the bottom of the page, there is a place where you can leave your reply and respond. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this podcast was beneficial to you. And if it is, please share it with a friend and give me a star rating on social media or your favorite podcast app. Take care, God bless, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Homeschool Mom Show. Visit Felice at MediaAngels.com and TheVintageHomeschoolMoms.com. Vintage Homeschool Moms is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network.